something that staff has been working on with Kane County to develop a dual port station for electric vehicles, and we've targeted a location right here in front of Village Hall along River Street, where there would be easy access to electricity, and we could easily convert a site for a unit that would be dropped in there along River Street. So the intergovernmental agreement indicates a desire of Kane County to go forward with this project, and they would actually provide the station itself. The village would cover the costs of a 2-year maintenance agreement on, or warranty, I should say, on the electric charging station. We would also cover the actual connection to the transformer that's in the general vicinity and some sidewalk improvements, and include this in our capital improvement budget for next year. So this is an item that you would see as you have your budget meetings coming forward as a capital improvement item of about $8,500 to establish this charging station in the village. So it's one of the goals of the initiative that we have for the Greenest Regions Compact, and would check off another item that shows that the village is trying to be green. So with that, this is an intergovernmental agreement that is also going to be going to Kane County for this charging station.
Thank you. Comments? Motion?
What's the cost for?
The cost of the unit itself is over $6,000, and that would be provided by the county.
Yeah.
The village would cover the cost of a 2-year commercial data plan. That's a plan to, so that we could actually charge a fee and have that equipment incorporated into the overall charging station. That's $1,000. There's a shipping cost of $115, and then a 2-year warranty program that goes along with it. The largest cost of the $8,500 is $4,900 for the electrical connection, and that's just based on a bid that we have right now. We hope to get a more favorable bid.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Spurling. Yes. Trustee Lee. Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
And Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. One thing that I would note, and I would challenge anybody, I don't think there's one single EV station in Kendall County at all. So over the next 15, 20 years, with the influx in EV cars on this road, I think it's going to be incumbent upon us and others to plan for that. And so I'd hope that our zoning ordinance update kind of looks at the necessity of that, if that's something that would be needed in the future, that we can incorporate into our sites, because it's obviously a lot cheaper to do it during construction.
It's
than later.
difficult. My next door, my neighbor across the street has an electric car, and it's quite a challenge for him as far as finding a charging station. So he would welcome this, so.
But the thing is, what do you do? If I have an electric vehicle, and I'm green, I mean, I have a horticulture degree. But if you have an electric vehicle, the village is spending $8,500 or whatever it was to do this charging station, which may be a little bit premature. It's probably not going to be used a whole lot in the beginning. It's going to catch on, yes, but is that $8,500 better spent
Are we going to
in our
charge,
savings account right now, or?
are we charging people for this?
Yes, we could. Yes, we can charge.
I mean, it's going to be set up so that it's, people pay to have their car charged.
Correct.
And there's no, we could look at, or there's no,
We would have to set a kilowatt hour fee, and I don't know what that would be right now, but yes.
Something to
The
look at.
intent is to have a
The other
minimal
thing
fee
is-
to charge.
Okay, I've got an electric vehicle, and, okay, I don't want to put, I live a half mile away, so I drive down to the village hall to plug in my electric vehicle, then I walk the half mile back to my house.
But you're paying for it, there or here.
And I'm all for electric vehicles and stuff. I think it's a little premature, but
I
that's
think
fine.
your car could be charged right now if it was out front. So,
I have no idea how to charge my Prius if it's capable of being charged anyway.
all right. Moving on to the next item, we have item I. It's a PSA with EEI for design and construction engineering for a 2019 GAP implementation project in the amount of $39,344. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. President. Before you tonight is a professional service agreement with Engineering Enterprises Incorporated for design and construction engineering services for the 2019 GAP. Per the board meeting on December 14th, this would consist of years 2 and 3 combined into the fiscal year 2019. Approval of the PSA would allow the work to commence on the plans in order to bid and contract the project in 2019. By combining years 2 and 3, we are increasing quantities and should see more aggressive bid proposals. Also, by combining years 2 and 3, we'll not fall behind in our schedule as we were not successful in acquiring easements for year 1 of the GAP plan. At this time, I'm requesting approval for the PSA with Engineering Enterprises Incorporated. However, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those at this time.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions?
We're still planning on, if we get the approvals, taking year 1 and making it year 3? Okay.
As soon as we can get the easements, we would implement that project.
Okay.
This is Sidewalk Connections at Old Galena, that type. I've always talked about that street light do you think we could, I don't know, nothing to do with sidewalk, but can you put it into the plan somehow? People come down there and all of a sudden it's a quick left. Of course, we can wait until Dollar Tree puts up and see if there's any lights, but you go over there tonight, you can't even see it. I mean,
Where are you talking about?
Are you referencing
Horseman,
Horseman Trail and Caterpillar Drive?
right,
Oh, a street light.
streetlight, there's nothing there. I've kept harping on this all the time, but
Yeah. If they haven't, our engineers and Public Works can probably look at the feasibility.
I'm not sure. Yeah, we'd be happy to look at
Yeah.
it for sure, yeah.
So I've noticed this, like, if we're going to do sidewalks in front of, along Orchard Road on either the east or west side, it looks like a drunk has laid those out because they go back and forth, back and forth. Can't we just do a straight line?
Engineer Wallers may be able to answer that more thoroughly, but
Yeah, well, let's just discuss that. I mean, each time a building comes in, the sidewalk plan is approved through the planning commission process. So we can certainly consider straight lines, but I think it was done to accommodate the landscaping that was proposed for those buildings.
It's dumb, it's
they
stupid.
want to put one of your trees in, Steve, that's all.
All right. Did we vote on this?
Dumb.
We should.
No, would you like a motion?
Yes.
Motion for professional service agreements for the engineering enterprises for the 2019 GAP improvement project.
She had the second.
Okay, thank
Any discussion? Call the roll?
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
And Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
All right, and that carries 4-0. Before we move on to the next item and the next items, I would encourage just a 5-minute break. My doctor says we can't sit for longer than 2 hours, so get up, walk around, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
I think I'll have our cup of coffee.
And call the meeting back to order. I think everybody is here. All right, I'll move on to item J this evening is a recommendation of Plan Commission of PC 2019-002Z, a text amendment to Section 11 of our zoning ordinance regarding gas and petroleum manufacturing. And with that, I will ask Director Young for an introduction of the item.
Dan Geyer, please.
So the next two items are the BioCarbon Solutions global request for a text amendment to allow for gas and petroleum manufacturing within the M2 zoning district as a special use. The applicants in this case wish to recycle tires into petroleum products and have targeted a site that they would like to accomplish this development on within the Montgomery Business Center, which is zoned M2. Currently, the ordinance lists it as a prohibited use within any of the zoning districts within the village. The Plan Commission, by a vote of 4-3, recommended that the text amendment be approved at their last meeting on January 3rd. The applicants are here. They can discuss the process that they'd like to build in terms of a new facility in the Montgomery Business Center. And that's about all I have at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you. This time, I would like to invite the petitioner up to present to the board. I know that there's been, I know 3 out of 4 of us made it to the Plan Commission meeting, and so we saw the presentation there.
I watched
and-
the video,
and she
so
watched
I'm
it?
good. Yep.
So essentially, all of us have seen everything that was said at that meeting?
President Bradley, he has a PowerPoint that he didn't know if we could use.
Okay.
Or he could present.
Sure. Go ahead. Is this the same one that you sent previously, or?
Just a little bit different, but
Okay.
probably has pretty much the same. So it's under a Montgomery folder, and then Montgomery again. And then there's today's date. Thank you.
Bottom one.
Thank you.
Great. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Newberry. I'm the CEO of BioCarbon Solutions Global. I'd like to thank the board tonight for this opportunity to discuss our potential project coming into Montgomery. I think, first of all, we just want to take this opportunity to kind of give you a better view of what it is that we intend to do, what we want to do here in Montgomery. I think there's maybe a little misinformation out there that we'd like to have the opportunity to correct. And we also want to kind of get a better handle on the process that we've gone through so far in regards to the text amendment. So firstly, if we could advance the slide, I just want to let you know, kind of a little bit about who we are. So we're an environmental development company. So we like to go find projects that are environmental related and use current technology to clean up these issues. Sometimes, in this case, we're going to be looking for tires. And a lot of times, there's tires that are out there that could be on the side of the road, that could be in environmental areas that we don't want them in. They create projects that are lengthy sometimes to clean up. Tires are meant to not to be destroyed, so it is difficult at best to break them back down. We don't want to create environments where we have mosquitoes breeding inside of tires. So just want to let you know the tires that we will be using, I want to consider to be chipped rubber because they are very small pieces. We have a few, I'm not sure if anybody really wants to pass this around, but as you can see, these are pretty small pieces. They're not whole tires. Be careful, there still might be a little metal in those, but for the most part, we wanted to come and do it here because we have a tire supplier that is very, very close by. So we would be in a good position to reduce the carbon footprint of transportation of this material. That gives them an outsource for us to take care of those and they don't go back as landfill cover or some other use.
Can we ask questions as you go?
Absolutely.
The tires that you've got, or that you're bringing into this proposed facility, you're not going to store any intact, full tires on your property. They're all going to come in some form of such.
Right.
With the metal already removed, and we're taking the tires from a I don't know if they're a tire recycling center now that has existing tires that are out in the open right now that are potentially breeding mosquitoes and that sort of thing.
Well, let's dispel that too a little bit.
Okay.
But yes, it will come from that type of source.
Okay.
But as you can see, that is the byproduct of their stuff. So we do not have any whole tires, either would be stored on our site or is on their site. They're already chipping them down to that as they come in on a daily basis. And from what I've seen, they don't even have any outside. They're all inside of a 45-foot trailer that would have come over the road to their location. So, pardon me? Okay, good. Is that good, Steve? Okay. So essentially, we want to bring a green development to Montgomery because we see the opportunity here with having Liberty, and actually we've been talking to them about other sites, but they recommended maybe this area they had the maximum amount of tires for us when we require 150 tons a day. So this was a good location for them, so we saw the synergy here. We wanted to bring this to Montgomery, and we know that we've got some neighbors that are closing down and we're going to be losing some jobs, and we figured this might be a good opportunity to create a few more. We'll probably create about 300, mostly a lot of those will be on a temporary basis, but probably once we start going, we'll be somewhere in the 50 to 60 permanent positions. Could be more if we find that this is going well and we can find more feedstock. Our system is such that we can create or just add on another unit and then create another 30 tons a day, or so we'll see how that goes. We're obviously very confident with the technology that we have and the feedstock supplier that we have. And we also have been working with BNSF to take our material away. So we don't want to increase carbon footprint from trucks moving in and out of the site. We don't want to increase the volume of traffic going in and out of the site. And so we've been working hard to make sure that we can allow for that to happen. I did want to address some of the comments that were made already, and I think this will be good for everybody. So can you advance the slides a bit? So that's the job, so we can go beyond that. What we talk about as sustainable is the system that we use that has been designed is 100% closed loop. So all of the, I guess I want to call it parts of the process, are all either under airlock or under a vacuum. And at some point, I'll have our inventor come down and speak to that as well. But I think that's going to lend to us having a very clean site. We're not going to have tires on site. We're not going to have a lot of, part of what we will make is a carbon black, and it's a very valuable commodity today. But you won't see any of that laying around the site, because if we're not getting it, taken up in a, well, not even a timely manner, but if we don't get it all, we're just losing revenue. So we don't want to have that stuff anywhere outside the plant. We do have vacuum sealed, well, not sealed, but vacuum to bring all the carbon into whichever container we wind up shipping it through, whether that's a super sack or some other vessel to contain it. So it should be very clean inside the process and you shouldn't see any of this outside the building.
May I ask you a question?
certainly.
And I might be getting a little bit ahead of you. When I watched the Plan Commission video, you talked about you are changing phases. So the byproducts will be a solid, a liquid, and a gas.
Yes,
And if I understand correctly, that emission, what is that?
Yeah, it's
Less
about
than
2%,
3%?
3%.
That's considered the waste
Yes.
from this cycle that
that
we're
would be
going through?
correct.
Okay.
So, and I'll let Neil speak more to the fact of, you know, how that process works.
Okay.
But yeah, those are basically the three states of which the tire will go through.
Okay. Thank you.
But I did want to address some of the concerns of the university. We certainly want to be good neighbors, and, you know, we feel that we will be with the process that we have and the way that we do things, with all the partners that we have identified, and we'll, if we move forward, we'll be contractually agreed to. Maybe you can advance this slide. So this is probably what you're all used to seeing, is this type of pile that is indeed very dangerous outside, breeding mosquitoes, potential fire hazards, all that good stuff, as well as not a very sightly site. So you saw with the bag that we just passed around, all the chips are very small. So they will be brought in on a daily basis. So we should not have the need for any outside storage. There is a possibility, and we'll talk about things with the village as to whether or not a day or two's worth of supply could be held outside under covered storage. We'll have to see, maybe we can expand the building, you know, to have that inside, and we also want to work with the fire department as well. So separating them might be the best way to go, but we will find that out as we get more into the design. Can you advance the slide, please?
You mentioned you use 150 tons. Yeah, I'm sorry. What does the Larkin Company?
What do they bring in
Yeah.
on
what
a
are they-
daily basis?
Would they be the 150 tons,
Yes,
or do they?
They could be, but currently, right now, they will be 100, and we have another company that's going to bring in 50.
And they
so-
would be brought in by truck,
Yes,
the other company?
yes.
How close is the other company? Are they going to drive all the
I
way through?
believe that's probably within just, you know, not more than 10 miles.
Okay.
Anything else? So I just want to touch on the process, and then I'll have Neil come up and describe it in a little bit more detail. So it's a thermal distillation process, which just means we're going to heat this rubber product, and it's going to off-gas the syngas, and then syngas usually is condensed down into a liquid fuel. So the same thing, we have off-takers for that liquid fuel. The syngas itself will be consumed in our process, so it's kind of takes care of what we would call a parasitic load, just to help heat our ovens. So we won't have any gas going off into the air. For the most part, we're not even going to have a stack, so the system doesn't require one. There's a possibility, I mean, we could put one in just in case we had an emergency of some type and needed to shut down, but unlikely. So once we go through that process, we're going to wind up with the gas, like I said, which we'll use, and the liquid fuel, which will be shipped down to Houston via rail, in a rail car, and then the carbon black, which we have, and that also will leave the site via rail car. So I think we've done a really good job of bringing in and out the feedstock without a lot of disruption.
Tim, I have a question.
Sure.
So the liquid fuel that's going to get loaded onto the rail cars, how was it stored prior to loading on the rail cars?
We will have.
Tankers?
We will have a storage tank, probably 3 storage tanks, and we'll use a proper dike system to contain if we ever had a spill, and then that will be, from that storage tank, it will be loaded onto a rail car.
Thank you.
So third step basically is transportation. It's a logistics type of thing. But what I wanted to touch base with on this is We're not really a gas manufacturer, so we do manufacture two products. One does happen to be a liquid fuel, but we're not refining it on site. It's just a byproduct of what we do. So in a way, I kind of agree with the gentleman that represents the university. I'm not sure that we need a text amendment, because I fully feel that we're within the manufacturing part of that. But I do feel that we most likely would need a special use permit. And we will see even about that. I've had my own code folks take a look at this, and they think possibly just a special use permit. But if we're not a gas manufacturer per se, I mean, we don't produce, gasoline or diesel or jet fuel or any of those things. We just have a basic kerosene type of fuel, and it's not going to be sitting on our site for very long. We fill one rail car per day, so I would think BNSF would be coming in and taking that out possibly twice a week, at worst case scenario, once a week. So we're open to whether or not this board decides whether it's a text amendment or whether it's a special use permit, or maybe it's possibly both. I'm not real sure. The process has not been super clear to us how we go about it, but we've relied on Rich to point us in the right direction, and so far, we've done what we've had to do.
And I do appreciate that. So are you here today in support of the text amendment, or are you thinking that you don't need that? Because it seems like you
Yeah.
want feet in both doors, just in case. I guess I saw the email that came through on Friday, the analysis from the individual, which is fine, and you're entitled to that. Is this an issue that you brought up? I know that you've been working with our staff for several months on this. Is this
Yes.
something that you've brought up before? Because this
But we
didn't
have
come up,
questioned,
pardon me.
we have
This didn't-
questioned
hold on one
that,
second.
but
Sir,
we
this
just
didn't-
wanted
sir,
to go along.
Sir, can I just finish my question,
Sure.
please? You didn't bring this up at Plan Commission, and then to have this come up at the last minute that you don't even need our approval doesn't set the greatest tone for this meeting. And you mention it tonight that this board can, decide one way or the other. Our staff and our attorney have reviewed this and determined that this is the only way forward. If there's another remedy that you have, you can seek that, but this is the way that we're moving forward, and this is what we're considering tonight, which is a zoning text amendment to allow petroleum manufacturing in our community.
Okay?
Before you turn it over to the chemist or the next person that knows more about, DHS, what tier are you? What's this facility going to be in tier?
In what, DHS?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what that is.
Department of Homeland Security. It's tier 1, which would be like Concord Phillips, where they have mustard gas. You got tier 2, tier 3, all upon how bad it could explode, and also what it takes to get into your plant. In other words, it's strictly terrorist, but it's also, the tier 1s definitely have to have, in fact, most of them have to have, what credentials do you have to go inside that building? I know you're thinking you just got your help in there, but that's why Department of Homeland Security, because this can blow, they ask. So I don't know are you like a tier 2, tier 3, or can your chemist?
I would think we're pretty low level, but I have not been determined that at this point in time.
They'll determine it for you, I'm
Yeah.
sure, so.
The facility that you guys have in Texas, what tier is that?
I have no idea. We are not in charge of that facility. It's just the same technology.
Oh, okay.
So that technology was running here in the state of Illinois. It was sold and subsequently moved to Texas.
And this is the same technology as that one?
Yes. Exactly the same technology. Well, I say exactly, but of course, that was 10 years ago, and controls have gotten much better. Computer programs have gotten much better. All the pieces to this thing are much better. So I guess I would call it a not 1.0 anymore, but maybe a 2.0.
Okay. The many of us, I think, in this room have tried to do research, extensive research on this process, the facility. Where is there one similar to this? And we haven't been able to find a whole lot. I mean, frankly, other than the news articles that talked about the Texas plant, I haven't been able to find anything on this to determine, basically just in our research, whether or not this is a good use for our village.
Okay. Well, there are 13 other locations across the United States that are doing this currently.
Do you happen to know where those facilities are so we can research?
There's actually one in Washington State. The name is Delta.
And are these any that you own?
No, these are not our facilities, and these are not exactly our technologies.
So they're,
But if you look at the industry, which is gasification and pyrolysis, there's several examples out there. This has been widely accepted throughout Europe and Asia. We don't agree that those systems are as good because a lot of those systems are batch systems versus what we have is a continuous feed system. So we're much more in control of airlocks that allow us to have the vacuum in this system, which allows us to be a lot more clean with the process. We don't open a batch system to the atmosphere like they do in other countries.
So
I think
do
we
you,
have-
do you guys currently operate a plant like this that you could,
No,
have you, your team ever operated a plant like this?
yes.
The one in Texas?
No, the one that was here in Illinois before it was sold to Texas.
Okay. And here's my concern. I want to, I guess my job is to take everything that you say at face value, right? Because we don't know. And look at this as a text amendment for the future of our village. And when we can't find an example of something that we can compare this to see what the impacts were there, we're really in uncharted territory, whether or not, we've absolutely heard before that we shouldn't do this. You know, the process won't do this. And then a special use is granted, we allow it in our village, and then a year down the road, we're trying to enforce a special use to bring somebody back in compliance on our own, which, to be frank, we don't have environmental staff that can review this on a more routine basis. And I have very little faith that our Illinois EPA, based on the experience that we've had with the Centerpoint property, which is just on the street from this, would intervene in any meaningful way. And so I just say that so that you understand where my line of questioning is coming from tonight. I've tried to do a lot of research, but I frankly have a lot more answers that we need before I'm comfortable.
Sure, well, that's kind of why we were hoping we would get this opportunity to help bring that along and answer some of the questions that you guys might have.
This seems to be like I know your marketing is very good on what you're trying to do, how it breaks down the raw materials, and it does help Larkin because they're close. So, and that's what we always said, we wanted one business to feed off another business. But again, like Matt said, I couldn't find you guys anywhere as far as having one of these, so I knew this was probably your first one. I knew that you had venture capitalists come in 2014, and then you had venture capitalists come in 2016. But what I'm worried about, I guess, is you're going to put this plan up there, and then the capitalists are going to say, let's sell this to somebody bigger, and we're out of here. That's what I kind of worry about.
Okay, so we have not had any capital ventures coming into this in any of those years that you've described. This company has been formed now for just a little over 4 years. We do have relationships with financial folks. They are not venture capitalists. We are going 100% debt financing on this, and this is a $40 million project. We don't take it lightly. We want to make sure all our ducks in a row before we do this, because I do not want to be on the hook for $40 million.
Okay.
So the facility that was in Illinois previously, that you guys owned, where was that located?
Neil would be a better source for that.
Because if this company's been around for 4 years, not that it won't impact my vote, I'm trying to piece this all together. Because that's the
Well,
use. and this is your
BioCarbon
company.
Solutions is a development company that started 4 years ago.
Yeah.
We went out, tried to find where the feedstock is, then we go and find a technology that we feel comfortable with that can take care of it.
So this firm will own and operate this
Yes,
facility?
exactly.
And I know we can't commit you to anything, but that's
Yes,
what you're saying.
That is our intent.
Yeah, absolutely. So the facility that was in Illinois before, what was the company that was under? Is that you guys?
That was under Neil.
Oh, okay. And is that? Okay, hi Neil.
Do you want to take over?
What was the company that was under in Illinois?
The company where it was housed was Kappa Products in, right near the Pullman District in Chicago.
Okay. And that wasn't your company?
I was part of the company, yes, and it has been sold.
Okay.
So the technology, I was one of the first people to do the development of the technology. And for the people here, there's a lot of,
Could you talk in the mic, please? Thank you.
if you go on the internet and you start looking up things that haven't really been done, there's a lot of misinformation. And pyrolysis has been around since literally Aristotle. He's the first one who came up, and if you think about, and you learned this all in 3rd grade, water is a liquid, steam is a vapor, and ice is the solid. Those are all 3 different phases. Everybody in this room has done pyrolysis. You may not realize it, but you have. Every time you go to a bonfire and you light the piece of wood on fire, if you notice, there's a little gap between the wood and your flame. That's pyrolysis. You're changing the wood to a gas, the gas is igniting. We do it every day. It's just that people don't necessarily understand what's going on. It's nothing more than phase change. So what we've developed is a process in which we take a rubber chip, and it's no longer a tire at this point. It is a rubber chip, and we put it in an environmental chamber under a vacuum, under heat. Because you're under a vacuum, there's no air or oxygen inside, so you can't have any fires. When you put that heat into that piece of rubber, it is what they call off gases. It's phase change. So that rubber will start off to be the size that you saw in that bag, and it'll end up being a finer powder because what you're doing is that material is off-gassing. Off-gassing happens everywhere. It happens in your mattresses at home. I mean, it's a natural phenomenon. So the tire begins to off-gas. And because of the vacuum system that we have, it pulls those vapors out of the environmental chamber, or in this particular case, it's an oven. We pull those vapors out and we cool them down. And to answer your question, what college are you from? Aurora? Aurora University. Aurora, I'm sorry, University, I apologize. This is a great thing because your kids could be learning some pretty good engineering on what's going to be happening here. STEM school.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's way above me. Anyways, we take this vapor and we cool it. And when you cool it, it turns into a liquid. So now we've gone from a solid to a gas to a liquid, all in this environmental chamber. The gas that you do not cool down or condense, we then pull that through our vacuum system, and it takes it from a negative to a positive, and that positive is a couple of PSI, which we then feed our burners, just like you would have at any of the boilers at VVF or any of the boilers at the sugar plant or an oven at Sara Lee or wherever just a standard manufacturing burner. We then feed those burners the excess gas, and we use that to heat up our system to generate the energy to do our phase change. Why haven't you seen it anywhere? Because the people out there that are doing it, the systems that they've come up with, it's an energy negative. The energy balance doesn't work. Because what they're coming in with is either electricity, or they're gonna run natural gas, or some other form of energy, and the cost is too expensive. If you were to use the amount of energy required to do this process with electricity, you'd have to bring in a substation. I mean, it's that significant. So people haven't figured that out. And as I said at the last meeting, the reason we can do what we do is because the advent of computers, PLCs. You know, we have self-driving cars because of the PLC. It is that simple. We can today look at a process 3,000 miles away. Look at our touchscreen, go, holy cow, look at that. That's working, that's working, that's working. Because we can do such fine process control, the system is now viable. And in this world, so many people copy one another. That's what they do. And so if you look at these other pyrolysis systems that are out there, they've copied one another. And I can look at these systems that you saw on the internet, and I can tell you that's going to fail in 1 hour. That's going to hold up for a week, because I did it. I was the guy, my partner and I. So we made our first oil in 2008, and up in Mukwonago, Wisconsin. And back when we had our shop up there, we were out in the middle of nowhere. And then they built a bunch of houses around us, so then we ended up moving it down to the south side. So that was the impetus behind that, because we were literally, you want to talk about it, in the middle of a subdivision. We were there, but we'd been there 20 years before, you know, the farmers had sold all the land. So to address your question about aroma, the system is under a vacuum. So if you had a leak, so if you had a leak, you'd be leaking into your system so that you would not be getting aroma coming out. So the system that we have is you've got your tire chips coming in, going through the phase. It then drops down to a secondary oven where we have it exposed to another temperature, and the entire process to do 1 ton of tires is roughly 1 hour. And the system just keeps going and going because you've got airlocks on the front end, you've got airlocks on the back end. So you end up getting, coming out of your system, oil vapor, which we're manufacturing. We're not refining. We are strictly condensing. A refiner will take fractions off of their column. We are strictly just condensing the oil, then putting it into a rail car. We then send it to either a re-refiner or a blender or whatever they're going to do with the material. Then you end up with a carbon, which is a light powder similar to like a talcum powder. And that goes through a cyclone, which is what you probably have 100 of those in your plant, in your town here alone. So the material gets spun around, and the carbon will drop down to an airlock, which then puts it into a container for storage and shipping out. And then whatever doesn't make it through the cyclone then goes through a bag house, which you've got even more of those in town. So the bag house contains filters that will catch any of the carbon that didn't get separated through the cyclone. So from that perspective, the entire system is basically under a negative pressure to prevent, for the movement of the materials and for safety reasons, because under a vacuum, you can't really have any problems.
3 storage tanks, one's kerosene.
No, so when you talk about oil, you talk about BTU content. And so our material doesn't have a name. So a lot of times we'll use the name diesel or kerosene or something, because that's what some people understand. So the oil has a BTU content of roughly 132,000 BTUs. So that's the oil that you're coming out. Now, a re-refiner may take that and turn it into kerosene number 2, whatever their needs are for. So we're not a refinery, and our formula is going to be different every time, because we're going to be running Michelin tires, we're going to be running BF Goodrich, and they all have different makeups of the tire. It's all proprietary. One tire is better than the other. They all get blended in, so you're never going to get truly the same answer coming out every single time. You'll get something close.
He mentioned shipping it to Houston. Wouldn't you ship it like Whiting, Indiana, or Joliet, which is closer?
Once we have relationships, that's what Tim would be involved with. I'm not as much into that end of it. I'm just explaining what the technology is. But yes, there are closer people. When we were running it on the south side, we were sending the oil down to Indianapolis to a blender.
Sorry, are you the inventor? You referenced an inventor. Is that you?
I'm one of the inventors, yes.
Okay. So have you invented anything else like this?
I've
that
got
we-
a patent on burning alternative fuels, where I can take a number 6 diesel fuel and make it burn like natural gas. I
But
did that
this-
a long time ago.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I don't mean to cut you off, but this type of use. So again, what we're here to discuss tonight is allowing this in our community or use like this.
Right.
Where can we find an example that's very similar to this so that we can, I guess, research that and feel more comfortable that what we're doing is going to be what's good for the next 30 or 100 years?
I can get a request from the people that I sold that process to.
The one in
And-
Texas.
Correct. But I no longer have any, we've sold it, it's their equipment. I don't know if they still run it. Once we sold it, was no longer part of that project.
And that one is similar or not not
The only difference
comparable?
that we do to what we have, that we're proposing here, is we'd upgrade the controls. So back in 2006, when we were putting that together, we didn't have the security like you have now for the PLCs. We didn't have back then the internet like it is now, where you can actually monitor from afar. We didn't really have the sophistication of controls where you can control your process much better control. I'm not saying that our control was bad prior, but those are the types of things that we would upgrade.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to continue with the PowerPoint, or were you done? Thank you, Neil, appreciate it.
I have concerns about Aurora University being that close. I don't know if you're set on where you bought the land, if part of that other development you can move it to, but I'm same way with Aurora University. They're gonna be so close to you. I don't think you're even 100 yards away. I mean, you're like across the railroad tracks, which is like 50 yards.
Across the railroad
Yeah.
tracks, currently they're further away, but they do have obligations for that land right up
Right.
to that
Right.
area.
I remember when they came to us with the pictures, Pat Kelsey was on our planning committee, and I said, put a ice rink in there. Because I said, I think they could sell that to all the high schools. And even though the board didn't ask for it, he put one in, and he put it way back where you're talking. He put it to the back of, and I went and seen Aurora University Saturday play. And that's gonna be where it's at, and to me, I think it's too close, I don't know. I suppose the land you already bought, or you have option on it, but
I totally understand where you're coming from, but we have been working with the village fire chief for a while now. I don't know if we can take a moment and obligate him to come and speak about his research into this. We've worked out arrangements with him to provide him with foam containers if there ever is an emergency, that he has something in order to fight that fire. We certainly would hope that we never have that kind of issue based on the technology that we have and the precautions that we'll have in place for the operation, daily
yeah,
operation.
I'm not really worried about the stuff in the air. I'm worried about when you say you're gonna take it and you're gonna put it right into a rail car, and now you have something that is different. I don't think.
Well, I mean,
they're not- That's where you could have your problem, and
Sure.
I think when, like they said, they got $20 million set there, it's a beautiful facility. I want it to go even bigger, and you're awful close to it, I guess, and maybe,
Heck, now, understanding that they're a STEM school, we should really be talking.
oh, yeah, yeah, there's some schools that are,
There's good synergy there. They could be learning from us
So,
on these processes.
Kind of along those same lines, the question that you had, and I'm learning as I go, because I honestly don't know the technology, is that when you heat these, you'll end up with this carbon black, which is more or less a fuel, correct? It's used as a fuel, carbon black?
No.
What do
it's
people
not.
use it for?
It's used in many manufacturing. Probably the threads of your suit are made from carbon black. Anything that's black is plastic. The computer screens, tires,
Yeah.
hoses.
Are they flammable? Is it flammable?
It is not flammable, unless, I take that back. When it is in a dust, it's going to be kind of like corn grain.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that opportunity for, a
Explosion.
flame to
Yeah.
happen.
Because that's one of my concerns. We have,
But the way that we process it and the way we put it in a bag immediately, we're mitigating all of those exposures. We've had to do that with, our insurances. They want to look at our plans. They're going to have their underwriters look at it. They're going to then go back and maybe talk to the chief and see what other mitigations we could be doing.
and they're currently going through this because you don't own and operate a plant currently. So this is
Correct.
kind of a new thing for them as well. And I guess to go back, that's one of my concerns is that we'll have a feedstock, a stockpile inside the building of rubber particles, right, the old tires. And then you'll have like 350 tons of carbon black based on the 1-ton bags that I'm looking at here. And just outside of that, you'll have 6 rail cars full of a fuel that isn't quite diesel or kerosene. It's an unnamed fuel.
Yes,
That you'll
but-
be selling. Hold on one second.
Sure.
And we're trying to decide if this is a good use for our village.
So let me describe another mitigation. So that fuel that we produce has a certain flash point. And as it's a higher flash point, there's less of a concern about that catching fire. The lower the flash point, you could light it with a match. This, you won't have that. And plus, you got to have the correct air-fuel mixture in order for that to happen. So during that filling process, it's pretty unlikely, unless we get a lightning storm or something of that nature that would provide a spark. But still, diesel fuel, you can't just light it with a match. You got to have the right fuel-air mixture. So we do everything we can to mitigate the circumstances in which that could occur. So it's just like mold, right? Spores are everywhere. You can't contain that. But the other 2 ingredients, water and heat, you can.
Yeah.
So this is not exactly the same, but very similar.
Right.
I have a question for Director Young. We're talking about the dust particles and the combustibility of these dust particles. Let's talk about Sugar Dome for a minute. Does Sugar Dome have a concern about dust particles and potential explosions if they're not, if it's not cleaned up and taken care of properly? I'm assuming the sugar is just like a grain bin, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
If we could, I'd like to have Glenn come say a few words. So he represents Liberty and
Yeah.
a whole bunch of other things.
No. My name is Dick Gus with Liberty Tire Recycling, and we have the plant on Montgomery Road here in Montgomery, and, on Greenfield Road in Montgomery. And we process the scrap tires that need a home, and this is an opportunity for that home. It's an excellent use. I've been in the tire industry for probably 50 years, and the first part of my career I spent designing tires, so I know exactly what goes into a tire. The last part of my career with Liberty, I've spent my time trying to figure out how to tear them apart so that we can use that raw material for a value. And the pyrolysis technology, you said it's been around since Aristotle. There weren't tires then, but tire pyrolysis has been in Germany for many years. And it's been brought, that technology has been brought to this country. It's a very good technology. There are various technologies out there that can perform this service. BioCarbon is one of those. And there is a company called Pyrolytics that is now in Terre Haute, Indiana, and that's a German-funded company, and they're producing similar materials that you're being talked about tonight. There's a company called Delta Energy. They're in Natchez, Mississippi. I visited both of these, by the way. And the Natchez, Mississippi plant was put up by Delta, and Bridgestone has just invested several $1 million in that plant. What Bridgestone is looking for is the carbon black. So the carbon black, as it comes out, in the processing of tires and the manufacturing of tires, use carbon black, use a lot of oil, because rubber, synthetic rubber is oil, and there's natural rubber. So when you process the pyrolysis, you get the oil back out, you get the carbon black. And there's a shortage of carbon black now, so it's very much in demand around the world. And the process that we're talking about here is a very good process. If it came to Montgomery, Illinois, it would really solve part of the environmental problem we have with scrap tires. We have probably 300 million scrap tires generated annually in the United States. Liberty Tire processes 150 million of those. In Illinois, we really don't have a good home. And so the reason that this company is looking at us, and we've encouraged them to come close by, because it makes sense for us to process that tire as it comes into our door as a whole tire into a chip that we can move down the road to Montgomery and have them save the raw material coming out of that. And that carbon black can go back into tires, or it can go back in the paint industry. It has a lot of uses. It's being done. So the questions you're asking about explosions and things like that, people have it under control. It's not new. They've done it for years. And we'd like to bring that here to Montgomery so that we can show, you know, the state of Illinois and basically the tire industry what can be done with the material here. It's a wonderful environmental solution. It's sustainable. It has all the buzzwords for sustainability. And the fact that major manufacturers today are investing in companies that do this is a good sign that they're looking for that carbon black coming back, because they need it. Why not recover it from the tire? I think that clearly I support this. I think that the questions are very good and the concern from the neighborhood. But clearly, there are places you can look. If you go online, look at Pyrolytics in Terre Haute, Indiana, look at Delta Energy in Natchez, Mississippi. There's another one in Alberta, Canada called Green Carbon. And they are processing OTR tires in a chamber and getting out the energy and the carbon black also. So I'd suggest you look at those. This is similar. They're all different a little bit, but it produces the same end product. And that's what we're looking for from the recycling standpoint.
I have a quick question, Gus. How much weight do you put in a truck full of these chips? It talks
weight?
about 150 tons a day. How many trucks are we talking about?
When we process the chips into a container, it's probably, I would guess, 10 to 15 ton max in a trailer. We get about 12 to 1,400 whole tires in a trailer when we're bringing them in. And the chips are probably around that neighborhood.
So about 10 trucks a day.
Yeah, about that. But I gotta tell you, we're processing a lot of tires here. A lot of tires.
Oh, with the facility.
Pardon?
If this facility is approved,
Our
you will.
Liberty facility in Montgomery, we do, I think, about 17,000 tires a day through there. And you won't find any of them laying around. They're all in trucks.
I think you mentioned when you came here, airplane tires?
Airplane tires? We use airplane tires on the Lakin side of the business, which is a die cutting business. That's not part of Liberty. That's not part of this group.
Okay,
The chips are coming out of the other tires.
okay.
The average whole tire is about 22.5 pounds. You have steel in the tire, you have rubber in the tire, and you have fabric in the tire. So what we're trying to do is capture that out, and the pyrolysis method actually converts that then into oil energy, if you will, and carbon black. So you pull that out, and it's a wonderful use of that tire, so you're not landfilling it. We don't like to landfill tires. I chair the Tire Industry Environmental Council, and we're trying to eliminate that landfilling of the scrap tire. Coming from my perspective, when I've designed them, I think the tire is a phenomenal product when you think about the work it has to do, and the energy that's in that tire should be saved, and the material in the tire should be saved. And that's what this plant will do here in Montgomery. It's not new. You can check it out, check out pyrolysis, it's there. Check out gasification, it's there. The fact is they work, and it's time that we do something to encourage these people to invest the $40 million so that we can have a home for these scrap tires. Okay?
What type of storage tanks? What type of, when you mentioned 3 storage tanks, what are you looking at rail cars as a storage tank, or are you?
You know, I'm not the one to answer that question, but I can tell you what they do in the other plants is they have the tanks like you would haul regular fuel. That's the kind of tanks that they use in Natchez. I've seen that.
Does Aurora University have any other comments after listening to the presentation so far?
Sign the form. Thank you.
I have a few.
I'll be done here in a second.
So the biggest concern is talking about a text amendment. So you're talking about taking the M2 district, not this site, and changing your zoning ordinance, so anywhere in M2, and uses much more, and I'll talk about these uses, but much more intensive than these uses can be in our backyard. I think that's a totally inappropriate way to address a zoning problem. But if and if you use the special use process, then you can drill down to the site. And then the problem I have from the standpoint is, my understanding is this, and they're very knowledgeable and they're very open to discussion, but this plant hasn't been designed yet, okay? I dealt with a peaker power plant in Aurora. Aurora had no one in city staff that could review the plans of a peaker power plant. And they relied on the energy company to do that. You can't you can't vet it. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but you won't be able to know, how are you going to set performance standards? I've dealt with tank farms. Tank farms, they talked about dike system. Well, what standards are you going to use to decide what size the dikes are to hold the oil if there's a spill out of a tank? What's going to control moving the oil from the tanks to the cars, to the rail cars? And what if there's a spill? So, there's a lot of pieces to this that I think you would have to get a much higher confidence level or hire an outside consultant to deal with in order for you, once you decide that it was an appropriate use. And I just think it's totally inappropriate to amend your zoning ordinance with a text amendment and change all your M2, because this is the lowest level of intense use within this new classification. Once you make the amendment, technically you're required to allow anyone who meets that classification to place a facility here. And, I don't know that there's a big market for other kinds of things, but Aurora University doesn't want to be next to a really intense industrial park. We're very happy with what's there. We're happy with uses that are compatible with what's there. We'd be happy with this use if there was enough controls in it, but we can't make that judgment today. So those are the concerns.
Thanks, sir. All right, did you want to keep going with the presentation? Or is there anything else that we haven't covered in there that you wanted to cover? I didn't want to cut you off.
I think we probably hit on most of it. I just wanted to get the information out there so that any questions that you might have, we have the opportunity while we're here to discuss and get that information disseminated without a whole bunch of misinformation
Yeah,
out there.
and what is that you're talking about?
You know, there's been articles written that we're an incinerator. We're not.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
You know, that we have emissions. We don't.
And that was from the news article?
Yeah,
Okay,
you know, that was, you know, so I just want to make sure that we address those.
yeah.
Because, you know, obviously, we don't want to be classified as something that we're not.
Sure.
We're a very environmental company, and we do care about what's going on. And, you know, we just saw this as a terrific opportunity with lots of synergy with all the local folks that we would use to build it, to maintain it, the workforce, the supplies. You know, we look at it on paper, it's a great location. and a
I
wonderful
just want to point
opportunity.
out, that I know Planning Commission was 4-3 in favor,
Yes.
but on this slide, 97.96 emission-free. On the presentation that you gave to the Planning Commission, it said 99.96.
Well, it did
And
have
there's a
both.
pretty glaring error.
2%, I mean, it was just a typo. So, and the original one that we did provide to them did say 97.
But the one the
So-
Planning Commission saw said 97.96.
The one that we submitted originally to the Planning Commission for their review. And then when we did the PowerPoint for that particular meeting, there was a typo. That's,
And I think, and I'm just going to be honest, I think part of the misinformation, and I'm not blaming Tyler at all, part of the misinformation that he used to write his letter came from community development, and I think part of their issue was that they don't know how to classify this. They don't know enough about the process to really know how to go about this. So, you know,
You're saying that we were classifying it wrong?
well, I don't know, are they a refinery? All the discussions that I've had with Rich in the beginning, it was refining. And it was a text amendment because it was refining. What are they refining?
It's, well, I think the agenda item says, what is the change? Gas and petroleum manufacturing. Seems accurate, based on what we've heard.
and I mean, there's an ethanol plant, right? You know, within a mile. Is that refining?
Are you asking me?
I mean, that's the question. I mean, it may have already set a precedence. It might already be very close to where we are, and of course, already in the village. Yeah, I don't know how you classified that one, so, but we're far less intensive than that. So if that was considered not refining, then we certainly should be classified as not refining.
I don't know what site he's referencing.
What site is that you're
On the
referencing?
VVF site,
They're not in the village.
BVF is
Or-
not in the village.
Okay, they're surrounded by the village.
Right, but we
They're
would have
not
had
in the
no.
village.
Okay,
We
but
had no say in what
if
they
there's
do
an
there.
issue at VVF, does it affect the village? Okay,
Right, but there was no zoning approval ever granted to them. So the point is well taken, but moot, because we had no say in what went in there. And to be honest, we probably wouldn't allow that same process to come into our community now.
okay?
Okay. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add before I ask staff for any comments on the board? Anything remaining that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, we could very briefly, just if you'll let me go for just another minute. We did have a very nice meeting this morning with our insurance company. They also think this is a very low risk. We talked about all the various things that we would have in place, all the different risk insurances that we would have. And, you know, if this were to move forward or even into a special use permit, the village could then say, hey, we want $1 million liability process, or we want a $5 million, or whatever that is. I mean, you still have the ability to come back and say, if we allow this, you will provide these mitigations
Can we
or these
legally do that
insurances.
for special use? We can.
There's
Okay.
Because under the special use, as far as I know, and I am an architect by trade, so I do know a little bit about these, you certainly have that opportunity to create any restriction that you would like, within reason, I think. So you do still have some outlets to help assist you.
Yeah, and Laura, do you want to comment on that a little bit? So the other way that we've talked about that before is if this is a special use if this is allowed via special use in our community, if you meet the six criteria, we should approve it.
Yeah, and I think that that's what Bruce was alluding to as well with if you're allowing something, you know, there's two separate issues. There's the text amendment, which would say, yes, we're allowing this in any zoning district so long as it meets those criteria. So again, the analysis, you know, we can look at this particular site and determine whether or not this use is good, but the text amendment would in fact open the door for anything that fits in that classification. And then, you know, moving forward, if it meets those 6 LaSalle standards, then you would also grant it, you know, in the same manner that we've reviewed special uses before. So the question then wouldn't become whether we like their plan or not, it would be whether their plan meets those 6 criteria, and if it did, then the board should grant it because it's already allowed it as a special use.
Okay. And has the whole board seen the email that the petitioner had sent to staff on Friday? The outlining the code that he referenced earlier, that they don't need a special use? Have you guys all seen that? I was copied on the email. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that as well.
Yep, and we did review that issue as well, and there's a number of provisions that say, you know, obviously this is not a clear-cut, you know, black and white issue, but the code says when there's a question, it defers to the village or to community development to determine what the best way it fits in the current thing is, or in the alternative, if community development doesn't find that it fits within the code, there's other provisions in section 4 that essentially say if something's not listed, it's by virtue excluded. So there's a lot of discretion in the village with how it fits in our ordinance. And I believe that that's what has happened here is community development has found, based on the information that was provided to it, what was the most analogous use, which, you know, we believe is the correct classification, which would in fact require the special use. And again, you know, the alternative argument would be, since if it's not specifically listed in the code and there's not a close match, that it is, then it's excluded by virtue of the fact that it's not listed anywhere.
Okay. And thus we're here.
So this is kind of uncharted territory, that being that this is on the cusp of becoming.
I think we've had this before. in
How?
different-
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases in zoning where something isn't necessarily going to be 100% a particular use or not. And then the question becomes whether or not it's analogous enough to something that is allowed or whether or not it's strict out, not allowed. But in any case, this would require a text amendment because if it's not listed anywhere, then you'd have to list to allow it somewhere. But rather than creating a new classification, we looked at the existing classifications that we believe that it felt the most closely with, and then just proposed to move that from Class A to Class B.
How do we investigate this and do our due diligence as far as investigating this process and seeing what other locations are somewhat comparable? And then limit it so we're not saying, okay, we're not doing a refining, we're not doing gas or petroleum, that sort of thing, and say, okay, this is, we're accepting of this use and this type of process only, and then we restrict everything else, because that's what I want to do. I don't want Mobile to come in here and begin a refining process, but I see this as a green use of what is otherwise historically a product that is hard to deal with, hard to eliminate. And now we're taking that and we're solving that problem. And we always talk as a board about having businesses and manufacturing that have synergistic relationships with other businesses and manufacturing. And this is exactly what that's doing. Don't be scared of the process because none of us understand it. Let's look at it. Let's do our due diligence. Let's understand it. Let's try and get something worked out. How many more manufacturing jobs are we going to lose?
wouldn't like a beer distributor or beer distillery type of thing be in the same type of,
I don't know.
right? I mean, that's, they have the vats, they have the whatever, and I mean, they could come in then, and we can still ask them to pay for testing, correct? Down the road in this arrangement?
I think you can't too much get into the micromanagement of how it's done, but you can reasonably tie certain conditions to
I'm
the
not-
allowing the special use.
I mean, like testing of the ground, have it tested and then have them pay for the testing 5 years later to make sure there's no loss going in the ground or anything like that.
Couple of, well, before, you can answer that, that's fine.
It could be a possibility.
Okay.
So, and one of the things, and I've talked with the engineers that have reviewed this or read the responses that they've had, you know, groundwater or ground contamination, it doesn't seem to be a huge concern with this use. And neither is the emissions from their production, right? The data that they passed along on Friday, I appreciate that. From the EPA website, Huff and Huff reviewed that, you guys all saw that. They don't have a huge concern with the CO2 and the other gases that they talk about. So that's that. But once this gets approved, and if this is entirely the way they say that it is, and there's controls and protections in there so that if something fails on your entirely closed-loop system, which I struggle with because we can't find an entire closed-loop system to investigate or review. If anything happens with that, then what's the plan? If there is a failure anywhere in your plant, what kind of impact could that have to the area? And that's my concern more is and that was what Huff and Huff put in their email today. I don't know if you had seen that. They reviewed the information that you passed along on Friday, and I guess I should note for the board, generally I don't really like when we get information at the 11th hour, like the request for no zoning change that you don't even need a permit. Because then we end up with prints in front of us today, or Huff and Huff reviewed this weekend, and their concern was not so much the emissions, the 97.96 gas emissions from the plant. They said that that's comparable, it sounds like, to other uses, if not much less. But the last part of their email talks about that concern, what happens if there's a failure, and it says that the combustion is generally fine. However, the facility proposes to conduct a far more complicated overall process, yet provides next to no details on their unique operations. And so we're sitting here tonight, potentially moving forward with a zoning change, and basically the only person that I could find that knows anything about this process says that he's not comfortable yet with the process. That's my biggest
Can I
concern.
just address your concern there on the last
Yeah.
point? So what we try to do, which is I think maybe a little bit different than a lot of other pyrolysis and gasification units, they try to scale the unit up so that they're using one unit to do all of their stuff. So there, I would agree with you. If there was an issue, it could be catastrophic. But what we do is we use modules, smaller modules in series. So if we had a problem with one, we would just shut it down, and our other systems would continue to run. We do have redundant systems. So if that one had to be brought offline for any reason, it was having an issue, we do have others in reserve to take that. So I think, excuse me, again, that's kind of a mitigation, is we did not create a huge system to take care of 150 tons a day. We have 5 smaller units.
Yeah.
So
And you
if
say
those
that
were
you-
to have an issue, it would be far less.
Yeah.
Right.
And you say that you do that. Where do you do that?
This is what we're proposing to do on
So
this
have you
site.
ever done that before to give us some level of comfort that the process works?
Well, obviously, the process has been proven. So we had the prototype that was running.
The
That
one unit?
prototype was sold.
Yeah,
That prototype is proven.
right.
So we're not creating a new prototype. We're using the exact same technology.
Except for that it's not the
Except for-
same technology, you're improving it.
Well, we're improving the controls on that
Okay,
technology,
that's
but
just
the
one
basis
unit.
is the same.
And you're proposing how many units here?
5. We will have 7 altogether because we have 2 redundant systems.
And is this system set up anywhere else that we can look at that?
No, not to my knowledge.
And that's my biggest and main concern with this, is I can find research on the internet, and from what staff has sent to us, waste to energy, right?
I don't even like to use that connotation because waste to energy, to me, brings up visions of a mass burn facility.
Okay.
So they burn trash, tires, everything to create steam to power. It's not what we do.
And you said at the Plan Commission that you're going to start by using tires, but your presentation talked about other materials that you could use. What were those other materials?
That could be municipal solid waste from either a landfill or a transfer station, plastic bottles, biomedical waste. All of those issues can be solved with this technology. Now, of course, we're not planning to do that here, but those are other feedstocks that could be done in a similar fashion.
So would you be comfortable limiting your feedstock to entirely tires at this site?
Absolutely.
Because that, when you start throwing around those other words, I mean, even this, it's just, it doesn't seem like this matches the vision that this community's had. I mean, the waste to energy, I was going to say, if done correctly, there's some research out there. If you have a closed loop system and other things, it can be okay, right? And net zero to the environment. But if you don't utilize that kind of stuff, it can be very bad for the environment. And based on all of this conversation tonight and the fact that the plant you're proposing here has never been built in this shape with this systems, makes me very uncomfortable allowing this use or any petroleum manufacturing in our community, because I don't think the reward is worth the risk to our community. Aurora University's been in that location, they just built that. They've been in Aurora for 100 years? 125 years. This business that's going to operate this has been around for 4 or 12 or whatnot, and I don't say that to be little, but I'm just saying is that our investment is in the next 30 or 100 years in this community, and that might not be the same investment that you have, and that's okay, but that's why I'm asking the questions that I am.
No, we welcome all questions because we want to get this out there. If, you know, like I said, there's mitigations that could be done. Sometimes, you know, new technology, you got to take a chance. What if it's better than what we thought it was?
I don't think we got to take a chance is the motto that we're going to follow here, with all due respect. Go ahead.
Well, I have a question for you, Tim. In the 10 years.
Let me address this waste to energy. I mean, I think we're really off track here. What we're talking about is tire recycling. You're taking components of the tire, you're putting it through an oxygen-free zone, and you're extracting carbon black, and you're extracting the gases that are there in the tire. This is a proven technology. Yeah. The fact that you haven't found it, I don't know. You can go on a line and look at the places I just told you to look. It's proven. Up in Canada, they're doing it today with giant off-the-road tires because it's in the oil fields. They're finding a use for it. And I think that, you know, when you talk about recycling in the state of Illinois, and you have a recycling plant right here in Montgomery, that you don't allow that second stage is a real big shortcoming. It's a big shortcoming. And I think you should be comfortable with it. But I think also that if it's being done in the industry, that you should accept a technology. It's not a new technology. It's a technology that these folks have brought, invented a little different spin on it. But you can look at pyrolysis all over the country and all over the world. Look at Australia. They're doing it. Why not Montgomery? Why not? Yeah. We have 17,000 tires a day coming in here. We'd like to have a home down the street in Montgomery, Illinois. You could become the leader of tire recycling in the state of Illinois and actually in this part of the region of our country. So I think you shouldn't just dismiss this because you don't have experience or you're afraid to take a chance. There's no chance to take.
Yeah,
It's been done,
okay.
okay?
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Can I get back?
I'm not willing to take a chance on this, to be honest with you, until we have a lot more information. To be a leader in tire recycling, you know, again, I don't know the industry, I'll be honest with you. But I looked up the Tire Recycling Association, they do not talk about this as a use for the 150 million tires that they recycle every year. And I'm not saying it's fine.
It's not true.
Okay.
What you just said is not true.
You know what?
I'm on the board.
Okay, please send me the information, because like I said, I need more information, I need the right information before we can make this decision. The other thing is, I reached out to the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, their environmental group, CMAP, U of I, the environmental engineers that I work with at work, and I can't find anybody to tell me that outright, no, this is a bad idea, but I can't find one person that says, you should totally do this because you guys will be a leader in tire recycling. And why is it that nobody is telling me that?
That's a good question.
I have a question I was going to ask before he interrupted me. So in the 10 years since the plant left Chicago and went down to Ennis, have you tried to put one of these anywhere? Have you guys tried to put one of these anywhere?
No.
And are you having a problem? Is this your first go-around in the 10 years of silence
Okay, so-
that you're bringing one?
Love the question. There's been hurdles to getting into this industry because funding groups want a 10-year term from an off-taker on a take-and-pay contract. I'm not sure if you understand what that means, but that means that whomever your oil off-taker is, they have to not only purchase what you make, but they have to provide a minimum capacity payment to the funder, even if you don't make any. They're not willing to do that. So we have barriers to getting into this.
Is that because there's not a market for the fuel, the
Oh, there's
unnamed
plenty of
fuel that you'll
market.
be generating?
Plenty of market for the fuel. We don't have an issue there. Until recently, and I'm just saying in the last quarter of 18
Yeah.
to the beginning of 2019, I've gotten 2 funding groups to say, okay, we will agree to a take or pay contract, which simply just means whatever fuel you make, that off-taker is obligated to buy it. If you still produce it and they don't take it, they pay a penalty, which is kind of like that minimum capacity payment. So now your funding group says, oh, okay, well, if I have that, I know I'm going to get my money.
Yeah. So I know you probably can't, and I wouldn't ask you to tell us the buyers, but is this stuff being shipped locally, Illinois, around the nation? Where
We
are they
have
at?
looked probably within 100 miles. Well, we thought Joliet would be a good spot. The problem there is you got the Exxons, you got the, big oil companies who are not willing to take this fuel right now. They don't have a confidence level. So we have to go to somebody who is a little bit more accepting. That is a blender. So we will be bringing this fuel to a blender, and then they blend it with other fuels. Like, I'm not sure, how much everybody's familiar with that, but there's, kind of like the crude, what they call LSFO. It's like molasses. Typically, what they do to cut that is they use diesel fuel. Well, diesel fuel has a lower flash point, and it also has lower BTU value. This new product that we're proposing that they use, a renewable cutter, has higher flash point and way more BTU value. So we're not reducing that crude oil BTU value by adding something that's less. So, this has been a very long process to teach ourselves about what the industry can bear and how we work within that industry.
Yeah.
So we've had to work with our finance group to make sure that, we can get these done. So up until recently, they just have not been accepting of that. So I don't know what has changed the tide, but I'm not going to question it, because now we have this opportunity to get these projects funded and to move this technology forward.
Yeah, so these are investors or
Yes.
buyers?
We're 100% debt financing. So it's either coming from a hedge fund or some other type of fund.
And if you can't get a buyer for the fuel that's in the 6 cars that you plan on storing, what will you do with it?
Oh, we won't have that scenario because we can't even get the funding unless we have a signed agreement for that fuel. And if for some chance they can't take it, we'll find somebody else. Because once we're in operation, we're going to have all the samples we ever wanted to send out to all these other companies. Right now, we're kind of limited. So we have to go with whom is willing to take a chance on us.
You're right, I think carbon black, there's a big demand for it. I mean, charcoal, anything.
It is.
You probably have a better, but of course, your cost going all the way to Houston's gonna be expensive, or Whiting, or what's the other town over in Indiana?
Well, we may be able to work out something with Gladios, which is just in Indiana as well.
Yeah.
But they haven't come back to the table yet. So we're still looking at that, and this is going to take us a year to build this out. So we have a lot more opportunities to discuss with other companies for potential off-takers.
Tom Myers, have your questions all been addressed? Do you have any questions, concerns?
Would you be willing to?
Not to put you on the spot, but we're going to put you on the spot.
I'm comfortable with that because I know that you addressed Plan Commission. I do appreciate that.
We gave you only 2 minutes earlier, and we know that you typically like to take up more than 2 minutes.
I'll keep this
so-
short.
You can have 3.5.
I want to clarify that, first of all, the fire district has no position whether or not this should come into town or not. However, that's solely held by the process of the Village of Montgomery. However, we do a lot of process reviewing. Obviously, when the Sugar Dome came in, I never knew anything about a Sugar Dome. We have dust. We have dust explosions. There's explosion proof. The round discs on top of the Sugar Dome are explosion proof discs. So if there is an explosion, those will pop off. So the same thing here. We have carbon black. So we have a process where in Montgomery, you have Pomps Tire, right? And Pomps Tire's expanded 2 or 3 different times over the last 6 or 7 years. Pomps Tire has a yard full of tires. They generate 1 trailer to 2 trailers of waste tires a day. Then 4 or 5 years ago, Ken, when did you come to town? 4 years ago, 5 years, 3 years? So 3 years ago, we had a tire recycler that wanted to relocate from Chicago out to Montgomery. These chips that you saw in that bag, that's what they create out on Greenfield Road for like the last 3 years. Basically 100 tons a day. 100 tons a day is what they produce. So I didn't know anything about rubber tires. I didn't know outside of mosquito abatement. We don't have this mosquito abatement issues with Lakin because they're all in trailers, with Pomps because they have abatement controls in place. So when a business wants to come into town and I begin to get on the radar, we do our research. And I've researched this, I've read about it. I talked to the owner of the same type of processing that goes down in Ennis, Texas. They run a single machine like this. We put safeguards in place. When I first had my first telephone conversation with Mark Hollinshead here, and we had a conference call. I figured worst-case scenario. It's got carbon black, which is dust, so dust explosions, all the electricity. We're back to similar issues with the Sugar Dome. All the wiring, low voltage, high voltage in the building is going to be explosion-proof. I have a combustible liquid that has a flash point of over 100 degrees. That's a combustible. A flammable liquid has a flash point of less than 100 degrees. Firefighting foam is a concern. We had that same concern when VVF or Dial Manufacturing bought the Right Guard gel deodorant line from the East Coast, brought it to Montgomery, and they bought us a firefighting foam trailer. They have a lot of flammable liquids that go into those type of products. So they bought us a firefighting foam trailer, 1,000 gallons of foam concentrate. We figured when this group was looking at Montgomery, we wanted to make sure we were upfront and honest with them when they first came in. And we said, look, if you're coming into town with a process, I want to make sure that I don't end up funding the equipment to properly protect that. And therefore, we had a discussion about the purchase of foam. And they had agreed to purchase in 1,000 gallons of concentrate at a cost of $24,000. So I'm not familiar with this process, but I'm familiar with tire chips. I'm familiar with tire breakdowns. Of how they do it. They manufacture out here the rings that go around the barriers that you see in traffic situations, the round rubber rings that hold those plastic, whatever they call them. They manufacture those. They manufacture all kinds of implements for farm machinery right here in Montgomery. Right now, Pomps Tires heats tires, puts them in a vat, a very large vat, and they heat them to 205 degrees to retread them. So it's an operation that if you have it here, you have to understand it. You have to know how to shut it down. You have to know where the person that has the technology to shut it down. These PLCs we talk about, that's how the Sugar Domes run. That's kind of how your water supply system in the village is run, right? I mean, how do we know if a pump has failed at an unmanned station somewhere? It's through this technology that we find that. We were concerned about what would happen at the top of the Sugar Dome because it's unmanned. How would you know when there's a problem? And it's all through these controls and through a person looking at this. The Armor Dial VVF factory was run the same way. In the center of all those splitting towers where they brought in a animal fatty oil and split it to make soap, they had a big control room with all kinds of monitors in it. And that's how they would control the process. So I just studied this. Anything has a hazard. We have foundries. We have all kinds of things out in our industrial world. Out west there that create these situations, and we have to plan for a worst-case scenario. But if we properly protect it on the head end, and there's no, foam with tires is a very great suppressant agent. You can put water on a tire fire for 4 or 5 days. You can put foam on a tire fire and get it out fairly reasonably within a half a day or so. We have mulch fires here. We had a mulch fire at the lumber yard that we spent maybe 5-6 hours one night at and spent another 7 hours the next day. Whatever comes, we take care of and make sure that we're in tune to that. So with that, this Ennis, Texas, give them a call. Complete Tire Recovery, I think is what their name is. Let me just get it here for you. The gentleman there is Dirk Crawford. He has and again, I'm not trying to, promote it, but he's a wealth of information. Complete Tire Recovery in Ennis, Texas. I talked to the fire marshal in Ennis, Texas. Their operation kind of has outside tires. If you Google that place, you'll see a ton of outside tires. That's mosquito abatement is probably the biggest issue they have down there. We don't have that because our tires don't create that issue, both at Pomps and Lake, and so.
And the information that you got was from the owner-operator of that facility?
Yeah, the gentleman's name is Dirk Crawford.
And do you have,
He's listed as the president in charge of outside sales. Very good wealth of information.
okay,
I can give you his phone number.
okay. And the fire chief you spoke with down there?
He's the actual fire marshal. His name is Chad Webster.
Okay, and they don't have any concerns?
The one concern the fire marshal had was mosquitoes. Then the carbon black, making sure that the dust issue is controlled.
Yeah.
More so when it was down there, their operation is in many different buildings where they're hauling it from one building to another, and then this carbon black blowing all over. The other time, there was a process of human error, and that's obviously what we plan for, is the human error issues, where they spilled some of this combustible liquid. And it ended up in a ditch behind their building. It smelled like natural gas. They thought they originally had a natural gas leak, the fire department did, and in essence, it was a spill from this. So outside of that, they don't run it very often. They'd like to run it more, and, that's where, I'm not an environmentalist by all means, so these environmental studies, I have no knowledge about emissions, and again, we count on other places. When we had other spills, when the spill affects land, air, and water, EPA is involved. There's 3 divisions to the Illinois EPA, air, land, and water, and we use those quite frequently with spills. If it's in the land, we call them out. There's an emergency response team out of Maywood, EPA, for our resources to come out and make sure that all the rules are followed. So I could, I could
Right.
talk about this forever. but-
Well, and I think everybody understands at this point by my line of questioning that I'm no environmental expert either, which is why I'm asking all these questions tonight.
Absolutely.
So based on the information that you've seen, do you have everything you need to ensure that you can safely protect this facility?
Yeah, and again, like we've talked about, the devil's in the details. I hear that a lot, right? And once they come in with the processes, we'll review them. But the dike materials, NFPA standards, above-ground fuel storage tanks will have to be registered with the state of Illinois. They can be certain quantities. They check the diked areas. We have flame detectors that go across the diked areas. They'll be under their own deluge sprinkler system. Probably a foam system for inside the building, so like the protection you'd have with a airport hangar. If you were to have a problem inside of an airport hangar, you have just a ton of foam coming down that expands. So there are no guarantees, though, we just try and do what we think is the right thing, and the same safeguards with the Sugar Dome, explosion-proof, an elevator to get us to the top.
Yeah.
No confined space, so we don't need any confined space entry to get down into the lower tunnels of the Sugar Dome. We'll be looking at this very similar to that, how it'll affect water runoff and, things like that, so.
Okay. So at this point, you don't have concerns with this use coming into the area, your district?
It's just another one we're gonna have to research and make sure that we have a plan.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, like any other one, so.
all right. Thanks, Chief.
Yep.
All right, anything else? I don't want to have to take another break. I want to finish, so. Any other questions from the board? Petitioner, do you have anything else to add?
I mean, the only thing I would say is, on the rest of the PowerPoint, there's pictures of what this unit looks like. If you're interested, I would say flip through them. If not, I think I've exhausted everything that I came
Okay.
to say.
Awesome, thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to Gus for the different examples that you gave us. I intend to look those up and do a little more research myself, so thank you for those.
All right. Board comments?
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any additional comments from staff, board?
My big concern is the text amendment with opening Pandora's box.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden, all of M2 is exposed to petroleum, you know, that's a big concern for me, is to open that box. So if there was a way to redefine this into a smaller box that was limiting, that would be of much heightened interest. As it sits now as a text amendment, I have no interest in it. But if we could figure out a way to put this into a smaller box that fit more what it is, because it's, you know, a Volkswagen's a car, but it's not a Ferrari, you know what I mean? So we're trying to put this into oil refining, and it doesn't seem to be in that category. It's
It's not refining it, it's producing a fuel, but,
correct.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, when you have it as regarding gas and petroleum manufacturing, you're opening a door up for
Right.
all kinds of things. I don't know what I was thinking. The railroad tracks is what they're here for, so they're gonna go by my hockey rink in the back anyway, but I just hate to see railroad cars right next to where some guy's parking to go into some nice $2 million stadium. It just doesn't,
Yeah.
but they want the railroad cars, so you're gonna see the railroad cars on the tracks, because the tracks are right there. That's what they're there for.
Okay. All right. A couple of things. I just want to make a comment. I think my personal opinion is that we don't have a whole lot of M2 left. We don't have a whole lot of land left in general. We have the TIF area and some areas out west. Our M2 zoning is the most basic zoning district that we have. If this does not comply with our M2 zoning, then it's probably something that I'm not interested in. But, however, looking at this use, there are so many questions that I have left. I think the future of our community and our goal here is, I was just reminiscing with a friend about the mayor that just passed away, talking about a use that they approved that that was dirtier than anticipated, and we've seen that with trucks on certain roads, and I'm not going to state any of these businesses publicly. We've approved special uses with conditions that we've then spent years trying to enforce in court. I'm not in this to take a risk. I'm in this to, if we're uncomfortable now with a plant that hasn't been designed, it's not a use that serves the public going forward until we have a lot more information. So that's my opinion on this. I think my biggest, another concern would be the future of this market, the fuel storage on site, and all the other stuff I think we can mitigate, but learning more about the process and to get the feedback that we're getting from the petitioner on that we don't even need your approval and that kind of stuff, I guess, in the absence of actual information that we can review. Our engineering consultant, the only person I could find that would review this process, said that there's a lot of unanswered questions and our staff recommended denial. I can't find anybody other than the petitioner who's saying we should approve this.
The Plan Commission.
4-3, right. So with that, let's move on the recommendation of Plan Commission. How about that? This is just the recommendation, item J, PC 2019-002Z. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
And Trustee Lee?
Yes.
All right, so that's the recommendation. Moving on to K this is something that we usually don't see on the agenda. I thought it would be helpful. This is authorization by the village board to draft a text amendment for this. Typically, when we've voted up and down issues, sometimes it's just a thumbs up, thumbs down. We could continue to do that, But I thought that if we know that you want to proceed or don't want to proceed, this is an item that is going to take substantial time for our staff and our attorney. It's not a simple change to the ordinance. So I put this on here for an action item. What's the pleasure of the board?
I need more time to think about this and kind of get my brain around everything, so I don't know that I want to put our people to work on this yet.
Okay.
I don't know that I want them to put time into it yet until I have a firm decision either way.
I agree with what trustee Marisick said, as far as I don't think it should be a text amendment, but I think it went down when this whole process came and this use came, I think they started down the wrong street to start with. So I don't think it should be a text amendment and a zoning ordinance for gas and petroleum. I don't think that's proper. We got to find, like you said, the smaller box that it fits in. But I want to continue pursuing this and see what sort of information we can find. Somehow, I'm amazed that Chief Myers is able to find and talk to this gentleman, but our community development staff can't. I'm concerned about that. So we need to do our due diligence and check into this.
I think more.
Just to be clear, we would still need, unless you believe that there's something currently in the code that it is, we would still need a text amendment. It would just be the establishment of a new
Then we need
category
to-
rather than
We need to
using the current. So I think what I hear you saying is that you want a narrower
focus narrow our
classification,
scope a little bit.
but that would have to be something that would have to be drafted and defined and then inserted into the code.
If I could address the question about the Texas example, we specifically asked the applicant for an example. They gave us the Texas information. The numbers from an environmental standpoint don't mean anything to me, and that's when we hired an environmental consultant to review what they had provided us.
Well, I think now.
So our chief, one of our fire chiefs can have a discussion with the guy in Texas, but our community development staff can't?
We can have a discussion with anybody you